Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior professional, an expert in cybersecurity, and an author from Louisiana, USA, Mr. Joshua D. Copeland. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Josh is a cybersecurity leader, an author, an educator who's redefining what it means to lead in the digital age. He's director of cybersecurity at Crescendo AI. He has also the deputy commander of the Louisiana State Guard Cyber Reserve. He's professor of practice at the Tulane University, and he's an author of a book titled Unpopular Opinion, and we'll be speaking today about his book. So, Josh, before we get into your book, my first question, what first drew you into cybersecurity and how has your motivation evolved over time?
I was one of those folks that I accidentally fell into cybersecurity. I had joined the Air Force straight out of high school. I enlisted when I was 17, had to go get mom and dad's permission to join.
Mhm.
Uh, Shipped to basic training to go do logistics of all things. And when I got to my first duty station, they're like, well, we have this role for something called a work group administrator.
Mhm.
We know you like to play with computers. Do you want to do this as an additional duty? And then over the course of the next 20 years, I retrained into cybersecurity formally. I did everything from help desk to, pen testing, GRC, building out policies, was the chief security officer for an entire installation.
Mhm.
It was one of those things where I fell into it, but I fell in love when I did so.
Fascinating. And tell me, as I was reading about you, it's fascinating about your reading about your journey. What have been some defining failures or hard resets in your journey that ultimately strengthened your leadership?
I think for me, a lot of it was I came into organizations that were already failing. So I had to come in and figure out not only what am I doing, because most of the time I was not doing what I was trained to do. I was coming in doing something that was completely separate than what I was, ideally trained to do, and
Hmm.
then actually build programs around how to do something that we're all learning together. We're effectively building the airplane as we're flying it. And that has made me be very humble and very flexible in building
Hmm.
things out.
Hmm.
Understanding that I'm not always going to have the answer, but the right answer is we'll figure it out and we'll do it together.
Well said. Well said. You're also known as the unpopular opinion guy. What inspired you to embrace this identity rather than follow traditional thought?
It started off a couple of years ago. I was kind of doing some screaming into the void of the algorithm on LinkedIn of what I thought was wrong with cybersecurity, ranging from certifications to tech bro culture to burnout, and kind of all the things that we all whisper quietly on coffee breaks, but no one never really says out loud
Hmm.
on stage.
Hmm.
And I kind of expected a little bit of pushback, but what I got were a lot of really interesting and kind of quiet DMs from practitioners saying,
Hmm.
I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only person that was having this experience. I feel so relieved that somebody is finally saying this. So it kind of grew from there. So that's when I realized that my unpopular opinions might be a little more widely shared than what I thought potentially it was. They were just
Very.
really unsaid. So I kind of leaned into the identity and became less about being edgy and more about giving people a language for what they were all already feeling, and give them a platform to have discussions. I don't expect everyone to agree with me,
Sure.
but I want them to have that discussion where I bring up a topic and we can talk. Why do I feel the way I feel? Why do you feel the way you feel?
Hmm.
Neither
Hmm.
one's right.
Yeah.
We just have to figure out what's the middle ground between the two.
Great response. Your unpopular opinion is obviously getting quite popular now. But now let's come to your book, Unpopular Opinion. Um, Tell me about your book and what was the moment that convinced you that cybersecurity needed this book?
It was kind of a combination of a few things. One was the messages from people that I got and the responses I got on posts saying that made them feel seen. And the realization that a lot of our myths, things like certs as competence, insurance as a strategy, grind culture and as heroism, were actually harming people. And I
Mm-hmm.
had folks that I truly respected who kind of came to me. One of whom is my wife, of all
Mm-hmm.
people, saying, you need to spend time and put pen to paper, or in my
Mm-hmm.
case, fingers to keyboard, and
Correct.
really put it all together. I can put it on LinkedIn or social media all day long, but
Mm.
kind of wrapping it in one cohesive book kind of gives it a better um, presentation, and it gives you folks the kind of identity where they can talk about burnout, they can talk about gatekeeping,
Mm.
they can understand where when they're told they're the weakest link and they don't need another best practice manual. you
Mm.
know it's my kind of level to cybersecurity where you're not crazy, the system is.
Correct. Correct. You describe your book as a manifesto for professionals who are tired of the performance. What performance are you referring to?
The performance is kind of theater that we build around security. We use acronyms of status, cybersecurity, insurance dressed up as a strategy, leaders who look great on a panel but disappear during an incident, and the
Correct.
cultures that kind of worship grind and quietly breaking people. We pretend that maturity is because we have PDFs that look really good to auditors and
Mm.
dashboards that are shiny, and we have the newest tool. And there's some leader that we have that's got the perfect ring light and their Instagram perfect selfie, but
Mm.
meanwhile, the fundamentals, people, process, empathy, trust, are completely neglected. So that's kind of where I, you know, took this book to be the call out of here is where we need to be fix things.
Mm. Mm. And you call certifications a mirage. How did the industry lose sight of what real competence means, and why do you think certification system continues to be so flawed?
We've done something that I think is fundamentally wrong. We've confused what's easy to sort into
Mm.
what's meaningful. You know, certs are a convenient proxy. An HR can filter 200 resumes by CISP,
Mm.
and the board feels reassured because this person has, an alphabet soup behind their name, and the
Mm.
candidate gets validation because the industry is kind of riddled with some imposter syndrome. So I throw some letters behind my name, and magically I'm smarter and more capable. But passing a multiple choice exam proves that you have the time, the money, and the persistence to pass the exam.
Mm.
Not that you can actually lead an IR at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
or you can harden a system under fire. So our system kind of persists and serves the machinery, HR pipelines, vendor revenue,
Mm.
personal branding, better than it serves actual security or the truth.
Right.
So to me, it's real competence looks like demonstrated problem solving, portfolios and after action reports, the scars that you've gotten from actually fixing things, not
Mm.
just what you memorized or you can pass on a test after taking a 5-day boot camp and
Yeah.
being fire hosed with information.
Mm. You also call burnout a system failure and not a badge of honor. How can leaders start dismantling the cult of grind?
So first, we need to stop celebrating exhaustion. I've seen places where there's a wall of honor for people who work, past midnight, and it's
Yes.
really just a memorial to me of a broken process.
Yeah.
They need to redesign the system that makes on-call rotation sustainable, build rest and mandatory downtime into incident response, make sure I have enough people to do appropriate incident response. You know, you have somebody who's going to respond to an incident for 24 hours straight.
Yeah.
They're not functional when they're hitting that, 18th, 19th, 20th hour, let alone if you're going to have to go beyond that.
Correct.
Measure psychological safety alongside your mean time to respond and reward people who prevent fires, not just the ones who respond and survive them. So
Mm.
when your best analysts are at home and it's time for dinner, let them have, time at home because the system just works. And that's to me is truly elite cybersecurity.
Mm. Amazing. I just love this comment because I remember I have made this statement many times in my corporate career to young people who would come say, I worked 70 hours this week, and I would say, well, you're not doing the organization a favor by working 70 hours. Either you're grossly inefficient or you need help. You need an assistant, So completely agree with what you're saying. But moving on, Josh, you also write, if your security program needs a hero, it's already failed. What does a hero system look like in practice?
So a hero free system is boring, in my opinion, all the right ways. Knowledge is documented instead of
Yeah.
hoarded. It's shared. It's accessible. access is distributed across multiple individuals instead of concentrating on to that one person who knows everything.
Hmm.
Every critical function has a backup operator. Cross training and drills are normal. That's part of our daily cycle.
Hmm.
Success doesn't hinge on whether that one rock star shows up on Sunday when
Yeah.
something bad happens. It's when senior engineers leave and take vacation and nothing collapses. They're able to disconnect for 2 weeks and
Hmm.
put down their phone and put down their laptop, and nothing's going to break while they're gone because
Hmm.
you built the right systems. And if it does break, you have enough people, training, and process in place that they can handle it.
Hmm. You also say leadership isn't a vibe, it's a skill. What are the most teachable leadership behaviors in cybersecurity? And give me an example if you can.
Yeah. So for me, the first and foremost is always invite dissent. Explicitly ask, what's wrong with this plan, and mean it.
Hmm.
Let people, throw spears or poke holes into the thing that you want to do.
Hmm.
And if you do that, you're going to have a better plan at the end.
Hmm.
Normalize vulnerability, being honest when you don't know, and
Hmm.
modeling the curiosity of how to fix this
Yeah.
instead of faking certainty.
Hmm.
Reward honesty. Publicly thank people who surface uncomfortable truths, even when they slowed things down. The
Hmm.
person who raises the flag and say, "Hey, maybe we don't want to do this because here's a second and third order effect we didn't think
Hmm.
about."
Hmm.
They need to be rewarded for that because they're going to save us pain and agony when it's going to cost more later. And
Yeah.
then building succession, teaching, delegating, promoting from within so teams get stronger over time. You know,
Hmm.
having that thing where somebody can see a career path for themselves. And also, if I can't replace you, you're not promotable. So
Hmm.
if you're not teaching the person behind you, I can't promote you. You're stuck where you are.
Right.
So build appropriate succession planning because you
Hmm.
do want to be able to go take a vacation for 2 weeks and go see Disney World with your wife and kids, or
Hmm.
go climb, the mountains in Alaska, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well said. Josh, you also talk about AI won't save you. Tell me a little bit more about this phrase and what is your advice for leaders who are being pressured to adopt AI driven tools prematurely, even before their organization or their people are ready to accept it?
So it's one of those things. AI is a magnifying glass.
Correct.
So you don't want to let AI become an expensive way to scale your dysfunction.
Hmm.
AI doesn't fix bad strategy. It just amplifies whatever foundation you already have, whether that's
Yeah.
good or bad.
Hmm.
So before you buy another magic platform, make sure you're cleaning up your basics.
Hmm.
Have accurate asset inventories, tune your alerts, have clear processes, train humans who know how to respond. Because when you have humans trained, that makes it easier to train your AI.
Hmm.
Then treat AI as an augmentation and not a salvation. You know, one well integrated tool your team trusts is worth more than three noisy ones that analysts secretly mute or don't pay attention to because
Hmm.
they don't provide real value.
Hmm.
So when you kind of look at it from that perspective, you have to use AI as a force multiplier for humans rather than use AI to replace
Hmm.
humans.
Hmm. We spoke about imposter syndrome a few minutes back very briefly, but you frame imposter syndrome as an earned and sometimes useful thing to talk about. How can professionals reframe self growth, self doubt as growth?
So, you know, I speak at a lot of conferences, and I will assure you every time I walk off the stage of a conference, whether it's a
Yeah.
small regional one where I have 25 people in the audience
Hmm.
or a major one where I have 1,000 people in the audience,
Hmm.
I have the same thought. What am I even doing here?
Correct.
And the feedback from people who felt seen reminds me that imposter feelings usually show up when you're stretching into bigger rooms.
Yeah.
You know, if you're doing what's super comfortable, you will never feel uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And having imposter syndrome says that you're doing some growth. So I
Hmm.
tell people treat it the feeling as a signal. It's not a
Yeah.
verdict.
Yeah.
It means you're pushing your edges. You're not that you don't belong. So you name it, you talk about it with your mentors, and you use it as a fuel to over prepare, seek feedback, and keep earning the seat instead of just running the room that you're already in.
Hmm.
Keep growing yourself so that you're always a little bit uncomfortable, and you'll see great results.
Absolutely. You also say that you can't policy your way out of dysfunction. How can leaders rebuild trust when culture itself is broken?
So it starts with aligning behavior with the words that you have on the paper. If an executive quietly gets an exception while everyone else is policed, no amount of policy refresher will matter.
Mm,
Real government means auditing for consistency, eliminating sacred cows, and rewriting anything you won't actually enforce,
mm,
and modeling from the top. MFA for the CEO is the same as the MFA for the intern. In
mm,
fact, the CEO probably needs it even more than the intern because the CEO has access to financials, it has access to large amount of corporate data.
mm,
The folks who want the least amount of security are generally the ones that need the most based off of their position in the organization. So
mm.
trust comes back when people see that accountability flows upwards, not just downwards.
Very interesting. The phrase strategic bastardry is very provocative. What does being clear, not cruel, look like in real leadership?
So for me, saying strategic mastery is my way of saying you don't have to be nice,
Correct.
but you have to be very clear.
Yes.
You know, you have a lot of folks who will sugarcoat everything and wrap feedback in disclaimers. And all that really does is confuse people and delayed hard
Yeah.
conversations. Being clear and not cruel looks like stating expectations plainly,
Hmm.
giving direct feedback tied to outcomes,
Hmm.
holding firm boundaries on risk, and doing all the things from a place of care and not ego.
Hmm.
I'm telling you this because this is what the standard is, not
Hmm.
because, me being blunt makes me feel powerful. It's my bluntness is to help you succeed and be better.
Hmm. Hmm. I have time for two more questions for you, Josh. You
All right.
say kill the playbook. What should replace rigid checklists in fast-moving cyber environments?
So I don't mean to burn all
Yeah.
documentation.
Yeah.
Documentation is absolutely critical to what we do. But what I mean is stop worshiping scripts that freeze people when reality doesn't match up with step three.
Hmm.
I've seen so many amazing, technicians, analysts, and specialists who start going down a checklist. And as soon as it doesn't match exactly what the checklist says, they don't know what to do.
Hmm.
So replace rigid playbooks with principle driven frameworks,
Hmm.
clear objectives, clear roles, clear guardrails that give responders permissions to improvise. Because
Yeah.
the reality of it is that
Hmm.
what we're going to have in an incident is probably something we have not seen before and don't have a playbook written exactly for that. So train teams with scenarios that where tools fail, logs
Hmm.
disappear, the sequences
Hmm.
don't match up. So they can learn to pivot based on what they know and what they
Hmm.
feel,
Hmm.
not just what's written. So adaption beats adherence 100% of the time to me.
Amazing. And my last question for you. In your epilogue, you talk about building something real. What does real cybersecurity look like to you today?
For me, real cybersecurity is a human first, um, bullshit light uh, mentality. It
Mm,
treats people as unpatched strength, not a weakness.
hmm.
It treats leadership as a daily skill, not a vibe. It
Yeah.
accepts that resilience doesn't live on a dashboard or binders, but
Mm,
in adaptability, empathy, and trust.
mm,
It's less obsessed with looking secure and more obsessed with being defensible, even if that means fewer acronyms on a slide or more hard conversations about culture and hiring and systems. So, at its core, real security is stewardship,
mm,
protecting people, not just the infrastructure, and leaving the field healthier than we found it. Because
mm.
ultimately, all cybersecurity is about people. We're protecting systems, but what's important in those systems?
Yeah.
Information about people, people's livelihood, whether it's the employees, whether it's your customers, whether it's, a government system, it's all about people. So if we keep people first and understand that that's the end goal of everything that we do, we're building real cybersecurity.
Fascinating. And I'm going to ask you one more question. Uh, how much of your training as an Air Force officer, which clearly has discipline, clearly has very, very established structures, how much of that training has really helped you to write your book, Unpopular Opinion? Because what's coming through to me is a tremendous amount of discipline in your book.
Um, I give the United States Air Force a massive amount of credit in shaping me of who I am, and the things that I do. I've had amazing mentors from the time I joined as a young airman all the way through my retirement from active duty. And even now in my roles with the State Guard, I have some amazing mentors
Yeah.
that have helped get me the right thing and truly helped me understand that it doesn't matter what you do. If you take care of people, they will take care of the mission. And
Absolutely.
when you keep that as your first and foremost leadership tool, you're
Absolutely.
going to have success.
Great response. And on that note, Josh, I want to say what a fascinating conversation this has been for me and for my viewers and listeners. We covered some incredible ground on your book, Unpopular Opinion. I think my viewers and listeners, we just love your straight talking on so many different aspects that we don't somehow want to refer to or talk about in our lives. Thank you again for speaking to me and good luck to you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.